Good morning, everybody. My name is Samantha Mirabal. I'm with Melco's application team, and we're doing our design shop talk today to see what questions you guys might have and try to get them answered. If you have questions while I'm live, type them in on the chat, and I will see if I can get them answered while we're live. Don't send them privately. I won't see those. So just if you can type them in on the chat, that'd be great. I have a second monitor set up, so if you see me kind of peering off to the side, that's what I'm looking at. Trying to catch up on the questions. Good morning, Sherry. Thanks for joining. So let me just make sure everything's up. There's YouTube. Cool. And there is Facebook. So we are good to go. Awesome. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into the questions that were sent in ahead of time and see what we can get covered. All right. So how do we do something like this? You know, a split. This is kind of referred to as a split satin, is what some people call it. So the question is, how do we do something like this? All right, so there's a bunch of different ways. Someone posted up their settings on how they do it. And really, there's a whole lot of ways we can do this. And just to give you an example, I made a whole bunch. So I'm going to start down here because these are easy. So for whatever font you want, right? So I just picked a true type font, so because that was the original question. And if you go into your top stitching, so I typed something out, made it a true type font, and down here under presets, I set that to auto split. And this is the look that auto split gives you. It kind of dithers it. It's not quite dead center, but it's a pretty look. I used this for a long time. I really like the split satin look. Not the hard line personally. I don't like the hard line. I like when it dithers it. So that you see the line, but you don't see the hard line, which causes you to be able to kind of peek the fabric through. So I prefer it when it's kind of a little more muddled like this. So the auto split's a really nice option. Well, there's also one that's a common auto split. So if you click this down under the presets and do common auto split, that dithers it a little bit more, and it's down the center of the lettering. Okay, so you can see right there, it's going down all these wider sections. The satins over here are too thin to do that, so it only does it when it gets over a certain line, a certain width. So under 40 points, it's going to use a satin stitch. Above 40 points, it's going to do this common split. If you have an older version and you don't have that common auto split, these are the settings you would use. You'd set it to a partition of 6, 501, 501, and then make sure the angle's 90. Okay, and that will create something like this. Now, when you go away from that, what other ways can we do it? Now, these are all ones I was just playing with numbers to see what type of look. So I got the sawtooth look going here, which I thought was kind of cool. This is a really hard split. This one's a softer split. So you can see there's different looks, and it's just a matter of playing with those partitions here. So like this one has 2 partitions, and it's just a 5-0 split. So 5-0, 5-0, it's going to go back, and by having 2 numbers on there, that's what's causing that kind of dithered look. Whereas here, if I just do a single split, so 1 partition, it's telling it, all right, split it every 5th, split it at 5. All right, that gives me a hard line down the center. Okay, so what look do you want? Here, this one is 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1, and 0 with the partition of 7, gives that kind of funny sawtooth look. I thought it was cool. And then here's another one where it changes the dithering up, so it's kind of a little more not as smooth. Again, it's just different looks, so what looks pretty to you? And that was a partition of 8, and there's 4, so 0, 1, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, 1. Okay. So you can play with those numbers and get different looks, right? So if I go down to 6 and hit apply there, yeah. All right, let's see. 0, 2, 0, 2, 0, 2, 0, 2. Oh, that's not 6. It's got to be 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Apply. Okay, so there's 6, and you can see it gets a double split on there. 01, 01, 01, 01. Oops, I had too many, so it cut them out. That's kind of cool. All right, so you can play with it to see what sort of looks you get and what looks pretty to you. There you go. All right, So it's just a matter of playing with them, right? So you have ones that are built in. That's the auto split and the common auto split. This one's kind of fun. It's doing a partition of 250, and notice the angle is always 90. That's so it stays 90 degrees here. Goes in the direction you're sewing rather than having that split run kind of diagonal across here. So if you have different angles, 45, it does interesting things, right? Because it's going at angles rather than perpendicular to what you're sewing. Okay, so that's what I would say is, use these, your common auto split or your auto split, or don't be scared to play with this sort of stuff down here. It's fun. You can do all kinds of interesting things, from a hard split to sawtooths to just slightly dithered, and it's just what looks good to you. That's kind of what I think is fun about digitizing, is we can all kind of set our own styles, right? All right, so yeah, what else do we have? So hopefully that helps with that. How do I add a hoop to custom hoop lists? Okay, so I pulled up on the Shop Melco site, not Shop Melco. So this is on the Melco-service site. Go to FAQ and updating. Okay, helps if I can spell, huh? Updating hoop. All right, so that'll take you to this article that I had pulled up. All right, so if you have hoops that already have been added to it, but they're not in your database because it's old, you can just come here and update your database. And what that'll allow is, now when you come over to this hoop right here, display currently selected hoops. If I right click on that and then go to customize hoop list, now all the new ones will be here. Okay. And then you can turn them on or off, whichever ones you want to see in your list. I tend to just leave the default selected, but let's turn these off because I don't use those. I use that one. I use that one a lot. What else do I use? I don't really use that one. I use the 11x17. There it is. I like the Mighty Hoops. The square, I really like that hoop. The Mighty Hoops, what else? Anyway, so you can set the hoops that you have, and now they will pop up in this drop-down list, okay? So that's one way, is you can just go update your database, and there's the instructions here on how to do it, all right? So it'll show you for the different versions how to do it. Now, if you want to add your own hoop, that's also cool. So that's creating your own. It's not trivial. It takes some thinking to do it, but here, if you click on this information, it'll take you to this hoop setup, and basically what you're going to do is go create a hoop, but you have to know a lot of info, right? So you've got to know the dimensions, you've got to know everything about it, points along it, so that you can, like if you're going to do this shape, you've got to know all these points and their position relative to 0, so that you can go in and actually program that entire hoop in here as a custom shape. Okay, so it's, again, not trivial, but you can go through and see how it's done through here, right? So there's all kinds of setting up your own manual hoops, all right? But it's by far easier just to add lists of hoops that are already in there. But yeah, you can create your own. Okay. What else? What other questions do we have? And we got those links to you in the comments, so if you don't want to search for them, they're there where you can click on them. All right, how do you get a curved name on a collar? Okay, so curved text is pretty straightforward and easy. The hard part is, what is the angle you want to do it at, right? So curved text, okay, I can come over here and change that to an arc, and collars usually go the other way, right? So I'm going to go into the properties. All right, I did that all fast. Let's undo that. All right, so I type text. When you select the text, up here in your property bar, you have line type. If I double click on that, I also have line type right here. Okay, so I can change my line type to arc. Okay, so that makes it an arch, which is cute. All right, if I want it to go the other way, what do I do? Well, I go to my lettering and I change this angle to 180. All right, now it's the bottom arc. Okay, do I want to read my text backwards? Probably not. So right here, we've got counterclockwise. Poof. So then you can adjust kerning and whatever else you want. Okay, so making the curve is easy. All right, so making it curve around whatever you're going to do. But now you've got to know what the curve is on your actual garment, right? Lots of ways you can do that. You can measure it, right? Determine what the radius is. And then if you know the radius, then you can come over here, go into the, double click on this, go into letters. And if you know the radius, let's say, I don't know, 8 inches as a diameter. So my radius would be 4. Okay, so I can set that to 4. And then you can always check it by doing file and printing it to scale and lay it on your garment and see if that's the right angle. If not, you can change it. Another way that I do a lot is I'll take a picture straight down of a garment and then use these vectors to trace it. So I would actually lay a picture in here, use this vector, and then I would trace the neckline, you know, just roughly. Mainly so I can then take my text and move it around and go, all right, how do I want that to look? Yeah, about like that. Or, no, I want it to be a little flatter. Okay, so I can play with it just by visually dragging this line around. I can also drag the bottom side. Okay, so you can create it that way. So there's multiple ways you can create it, and it's really what makes sense to you. Okay. And then once you have it, you can go hoop a line and go. All right. All right, so get a curved name on a collar. Cool. How do you get a satin stitch with points on the end? Okay, so satin stitches, where's DesignShop? There it is. All right, so if I do a single line centers are this icon right here. And what a single line center is, it's a constant width column, meaning every stitch is the same size. So all these stitches are the same size. So in this case, 40 points from side to side. All right, well, if I want this to point, that means I've got to narrow this down, right? So I can't use a single line center. Or if I do, I have to do a second element, like this guy, for instance. And let's say I want it to go like that. Okay, because it's changing size. I'm going from one size, narrowing down to a point. Okay, maybe I want it to be centered. So let me go straight up and down, because then I can, let's make that 40 points. So there's, like I said, we can do this a whole bunch of ways. I'm going to show you various ways to do it, right? So I've got this guy. I can use my column 1, and let's start, I don't know, there. I'm eyeballing like that. 3. Why did I angle those last few stitches? Well, if I put these points right next to each other, it gets really narrow. Those stitches get so small, they're not necessarily going to sew very well. In fact, it's not very pointy. Whereas if I angle it, by the time here, that stitch length is longer, so I can get a nice clean point. I'm glad. Thanks for joining, Shannon. I'm glad these are helpful. All right, so that can help get you a nice clean point on stuff. All right, well, that was 2 elements. If you want it to be 1 element, what do? Well, I can use, instead of using a single line center and a column, I can just go straight for a column. You know, column 1, and then come down here, hold my alternate key to make those there, and then let's come down here and do something like that. Cool. All right. It's not the smoothest one, so I'd probably adjust this to make it look a little cleaner. That's better on that side. I'd have to do the same up there. Yeah, so that'll give me a point. So that's one way to do it. Yeah, so it's pretty straightforward. You know, do multiple elements, but really the key to doing points is going to be to use the variable width columns, which are going to be your column 2 or your column 1. Okay, we have some really good videos on the digitizing basics, I believe, where they show you how these different tools work. So it goes, the column section goes over the single line, the column 1, and the column 2. I have a beyond strong affinity to using the column 1, but not for a good reason. Most people find column 2 easier to use. I used column 1 for probably 2 years before I realized that these little arrows here, because I didn't take any classes when I started learning digitizing. I just banged at it, going, I can figure this out. Yeah, that's a hard way to do it. But I didn't realize these little arrows meant these are little flyouts, and there are more tools. So the one that's default is the column 1, so that's what I used forever until I was like, ooh, there's more to learn. So like I said, it's a silly reason, but that's just why I have a preference to using column 1. They're both great though. Let's see what else. So I hope that helps of getting points on ends. So someone's had their training is coming up. We've got so this is, I cut off some of the question because it was more just discussion on, they've got a new machine, their training's coming up, plinking around trying to figure things out before the training. It's never hooped a garment. It's coming from a single needle machine to a multi-needle machine. Congrats, that's a lot of fun. Fun fact, when I got my first multi-needle machine, because I came from single needle as well, when I got my commercial machine, I think I probably spent a solid day watching it sew, fascinated that it was painting stitches, because remember, single needles move about like this. They seem really fast when they're sewing until you get a commercial machine, and then you're like, oh my gosh, I'm painting with thread. Anyway, I was fascinated by it. Okay, so this person's never hooped a garment. They always float. This is a neat technique, basically hooping tearaway and then putting adhesive on the back so that you can attach things to it. That's fun. Can you still use this? Absolutely. So yes, you can still use a floating method. I would preface that with, it's always better to hoop when you can. All right. Remember, the machine moves fast and we're putting stitches in. So to get things to look clean, you need everything to hold still. If you're floating stuff on top, you've got that risk of things moving around. Not that you can't do it. There are plenty of ways to secure it, using basting stitches, using spray adhesives, using adhesive stabilizers. There's lots of ways you can stabilize it, but if things shift, that's when you're going to have errors with things not lining up, or it's just not looking as clean as it could. So it's always going to be better for you to use cutaways and hoop whenever you can, because that's going to give you the most stable platform to be able to sew on. Now, does that mean you shouldn't use the others? No. There are always reasons to float. This is one. Like, have you seen those where they cut the baseballs apart and then you take the panels and embroider, a number and a name or something like that, and then you sew the baseball back together by hand? I don't have patience I can cut them apart all day long. I have zero patience for sewing them back together. So I did it once, never again. But it's really cool. It's a really fun project to do, right? So floating it would work. You can also use clamps. There's different ways, but yes, you can absolutely float it. But I would just say, don't float everything. If it can be hooped, please hoop it. Because as you notice, yes, the machine moves fast. Can you slow it down? That was another question. Yes, you can. So where's my keyboard? So the keys to slowing it down, is it up here? Frame forward. No, it's not on this one. All right, so the commands are the adjustment key and up and down. So every time, if you hold the adjustment key down, I'm pushing it on my screen like you can see that. But if you hold that down and then click on the down button, every time you click the down button, that's 50 stitches per minute slower. So if you want it way down, just adjust it, hit it handful of times, and it'll be way slower. If you want to speed it up, you would hold the adjustment key and click the up arrow. You can also do that in the OS. Let's see if I have a screenshot of the OS screen. Keep all kinds of stuff in the back that I show a lot. No, of course I don't. All right, well, in the OS where you set the colors on the right hand side, before you go into that color section, you can select the hoop, there's an F to rotate and things like that. Well, in that same area on the right hand side, it's got speed. You can, before you start sewing, you can set what speed you want. Most people tend to sew around 1,000 to 1,100. If that's too fast for you, that's cool. Slow it down. I will say slower is not always better. So, there's a happy medium there. I think that I've always found the happy setting is around 1,100, 1,000, somewhere in there for most things. Not all, right? Hats, you're not going to sew that fast on a routine basis. Foam, you're going to sew differently. But for general flats, 1,000, 1,100's a happy number. All right. Yeah, so Shannon asked, Alex, I'll be right back to you. This is on the same topic, so I'll come back. Is there a way to tell the machine I want to slow down at a certain point? So, what machine do you have? Because, yes, you can. But it's done by settings by color. So let's see if I have that screen here. Okay, when you go into the color sequence, Bravos, I don't believe have this. That's why I was asking which machine. So this is where you'd set your color sequence. Right here, there's settings by color. If you turn that on, you can say, okay, so all of this stuff, yeah, so EMT16X can do this. So you would say, all right, so colors 1 through 3 at 1,000. So you would go into the set, I don't have it where I can click on it, but you would click on that settings by color and turn that on. And in that screen, you can tell it what color. So color 1, you'll sew at 1,000, this active feed. Color 2 is going to be a metallic thread. I want to slow that down. So let's sew color 2 at 700 and an active feed instead of 4. I want the active feed to be, let's say, 6 or 8, whatever it is for your particular machine. So you can set all of that in settings by color. And then, okay, I'm going to go to color 4. Now I'm back to polyester. I just want a haul. So, okay, let's set that to 1,300 because I'm feeling spicy, right? So you can, you can set all of that by color. You can set it by needle. So that's also in that tab where you can go, okay, anytime I use needle 11, so at 700 and an active feed of 8. Okay, so anytime it comes to that needle, it'll automatically slow down the machine. All right, so that is settings by color. It's fun. All right, let's see. Alex, your question. When doing puff embroidery, what settings do you need to make sure stitches cover all of the foam? I used puff font with 6mm foam on the hat, and some letters weren't fully covered. Okay, so foam, typically when you're doing foam, you've got to have a whole lot of stitching. So a whole lot of really close threads to cover it all up. Your density is going to be around, I would say, typically 1.8 to 2.0, somewhere in there, maybe 1.7 to 2.0 as your density. And that's going to put those stitches so close together that it's basically coloring over itself as it's sewing so that you get that full coverage. There are other techniques I've seen done that I personally think are way cool, but it also adds a lot of stitches. I just like to tell people about it because, like I said, the first time I saw it, I just thought it was the coolest thing. It does add a whole ton of stitches that aren't really necessary, but I'll tell you. So if I'm doing puff, let's say I'm going to make that 50. Okay, let's say all right, ignore the fact that this is not puff ready. Okay, just pretend it is, that I did my caps under here and all that. Okay, so I would set this density to, let's say, turn off auto, and maybe make that 2.5. All right, that's not enough to get full coverage, right? But I can then immediately go back over that with a copy paste, and if I made that 60, so it's wider, and now I take this one and make that what I want it to be, say 2. Basically, it goes over once, you rip off the foam, then you sew over it again wider, so it covers anything that's all the pokies that are sticking out. That's why I thought it was neat, but it doubles your stitch count. So it's, I liked it personally, and I've done that on a few times, but I don't do that all the time. But that's another technique I've seen used that works really well. But typically speaking, you'd make your density somewhere between 1.7 to 2. And that's going to have the stitches kind of overlapping so you get that coverage. You can always take your heat gun and even when you go to rip the puff off, you'll see there's got to be a technical term. I call them pokies. It's the foam little sticks that occasionally will pop out as you're ripping the foam off. Your heat gun just melts those away. So having a heat gun is really kind of cool. I took before someone taught me that little trick, because like I said, when I started, I'll figure it all out. It'll be fine. I was taking those tools that you use for weeding vinyl, and I was poking all the pokes back in. That was a waste of time. Don't recommend doing that. So, but yeah, lowering your density is kind of key there. All right. What other questions do we have? Where are my question list? Okay. Oh, we did that. So that was the same as that question. Until I just copied and pasted and... Okay, so I think I got all the questions that were sent in ahead of time. I put this just so that you guys had it on the partition. So that split font where I was showing you different numbers, this is in your manual. It's the technical of what's happening. The partitions are basically, there's a stitch, there's a second stitch. So when you say 4 partitions, this is what it's literally doing. It's dividing that stitch up into 4, and then your sequence, that's the numbers below, it's telling you for the 4 rows, 1, 2, 3, 4. For those four rows, that the next ones that sew, where is it going to put the stitch, right? So it's going to put it on the next row, your sequence is 1. So on 0, it's right on the 0. The next one, it's going to be on the 1 spot. On the next row, it's going to be on the 2 spot. On the next row, the 3 spot, and then it's back to the beginning. 0, 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2, 3. So anyway, that's a partition of 4 with a sequence of 1, 2, 3. 0, 1, 2, 3. So I just put that here so you could see it. The same thing applies with angles. It just rotates the whole thing. So I showed you that with the banding going a weird angle. All right, any other questions while we're live? Let me see if I missed any. So we got you a bunch of links in the comments, so be sure to check those out. I know we have trade shows going on, so I'm in Florida, not in California this weekend, so hopefully you guys have a blast, and tell me all the cool stuff that was there, since I don't get to see it this year. So, yeah. Any other questions before I pop off and call it a day? I'll be back next week on Friday. Yeah, next week on Friday. And the week after that, Thursday. For patches, can you give a quick rundown? Sure. Patches are fun. So, yeah, okay. So I'll come back to patches in a second. You're good. Alex, on your density, turn off auto density. That's why. So auto density, when that's on, so if I go into properties and I have auto density, it's never going to cover right for puff. It just won't. And why is that? Because if you come over here and I click on these dots, auto density, this is what it's doing. So for columns that are over 100 points, it's only using a density of 3.6, which is never going to be enough for you. All right. So this percentage is using this table and it's scaling it up and down, right? So turn off auto density and now you'll have numbers that you can type in. Auto density is great for traditional, like if you're going to embroider on polos and things like that. But when you get into the specialty stuff, you need to control it. So you need to be able to set your densities to your specific thread and what you're doing, your application. So turn off auto and then it'll go to a points, and now you can set it somewhere between 1.7 and 2. Okay, Alex, does that help? All right, so back to patches. Wait. So patches are a ton of fun. We've got a bunch of videos out there. So I think there's a bunch on Melco's page. So if you go to Melco on YouTube, you can watch those. But here, digitizing them is pretty straightforward, right? So let's say I want a 3-inch, an exactly 3-inch circle. All right, so I drew it. Let me delete it. I always do that. I'm sorry. All right, we did get you a link to the patch overview. Let's see what fun data is here. All right, so we got some videos for you. Ooh, yeah, like I said, I've digitized a bunch of them for you. There's also a doc down here of a different way to do them. So there's different techniques to it. This one down here talks about basically doing the sewing, cutting it out, and then re-hooping it to put the border on. That's a great way to do it. It works really well. So you can sew a whole bunch out on a hoop at once, cut out your shape, and then create the border. So there's a document there that walks you through it. I tend to do a lot cutting in the hoop, so that most of my videos are around that. And we've got some videos on digitizing them. But basically, let's say I want a perfect 3-inch circle. So I'd do walk. Right here is my automatic circle input. Click, left click, hold my shift key and move my mouse somewhere else. That locks it to a perfect circle. Now I can select that circle and type in how big I want it. So I want it 3 inches. Cool. I got a 3-inch circle. All right, let's center it because good practice. I've got my circle. So what are the steps to digitizing a patch? You've got if you're going to do it in the hoop, it depends on your technique you're using. I'm assuming I'm going to either have circles pre-cut out, or I'm going to lay a piece of fabric on and cut it out myself. All right, so I've got my circle, so I'm going to hoop my plastic or my Vilene or Badge Master, or just hoop your cutaway stabilizer, as long as it's synthetic, so you can use a heat knife. That's cool. So I'm going to copy, paste, Control-C, Control-V, give it another color. And I like that to be bean. So I hoop my stuff and I sew this just on my stabilizer. That's a placement. So that's just showing me where my fabric needs to cover, or where I'm going to put my patch down that I already have pre-cut, things like that. Then imagine I'm going to put a piece of fabric down over it. So now I've got basically a piece of fabric sitting in my hoop. Okay, I got nothing to cut there. So I'm going to sew now this step. I like that to be bean stitch, mainly just because it's nice and secure. All right, now I can grab my scissors and cut around that shape. So what am I left with then? Then I would be left with, I usually don't cut that clean, so I cut close to the line, but not right on the line. So then I'd be left with that. So a piece of fabric sewn down and kind of cut. My cuts are a little bit more jagged, but that's all right. You get the idea. All right, so now I've cut out my shape. It's sewn down in my hoop. So now I'm going to copy this guy down, paste it, change it over to a tackle stitch. So I copied, paste. I'm going to give it another color, hold my Control key down and click on the single line. And I'm going to make that a tackle stitch with a width of, let's say, 30. Cool. All right, so that's my zigzag. That holds the fabric down, so now it's not going anywhere. At this point, you do your decorations. So, you know, whatever you're going to sew, whatever logo you're going to put on your patch, you would do that now. Oh, I turned on the grid. That's fun. All right, so I'm going to sew my decorations down. I'm going to copy this guy, paste it, and make that a satin stitch again. Maybe a width of 40. Cool. So that'd be my last stitch. Keep in mind you also have decoratives where you can come over here and do these, where are they? There they are. Faux marrow. Or is that a satin? Decorative. That's different. Oh, I see what's going on. Faux patch border. It's going the wrong way because of the type of stitch I have. That's all right, because that needs to not be a satin. It needs to be this. Now it will work. Decorative, faux marrow. Cool. So I can use these guys if I want to give it a marrowed look. All right. It was all goofy because I had it set to a satin stitch rather a walk stitch. It needs to be a walk decorative with that, and then it'll work right. So you can create a marrowed look if you don't want the satin look. You know, what is your preference? And now you can go sew it out. So, yeah, patches are fun. If you're going to place pre-cut patches down, use a spray adhesive, use one of those peel-and sticks that you can laminate onto the back. Do not stick your fingers in the machine when it's running. Get these smudger things. I got a picture of them, I think, in my presentation because I liked them so much. These spudger things, or some, what is that thing? Chopsticks, any of those. And you can put those in the machines. If you sew over those, you might break a needle. Hey, you're not going to end up in the hospital. So Don't put your fingers in the machine. That's bad. But these work great. Okay, so, or use a spray adhesive or the peel and stick, which is also great. All right, so did that help any with patches, Pedro? Hopefully it did. What other questions do you guys have? We did get you a link to the overview, which will pop you to other videos too that are really patch specific. Oh, excellent. I'm glad that helped. All right. Let's see. I already talked about I'll be back next Friday. The trade show, go check it out. Oh, let's see. Are there any tutorials that cover how to do the trendy outline stitching? Yeah, so that's pretty, I don't think there's tutorials because that's just a matter of doing, I don't have art to trace. So let's see. It's just a matter of using this guy here. So you'd use a walk input of a bean stitch and you would draw whatever it is you're gonna, all right, let's say L for, pretend I was gonna make a, I guess I could go ahead and do it. Let's see. My cursive, that is not how an O is drawn, but O. Point. All right, get to watch me write love really poorly because I wasn't thinking. Anyway, so I could use, that's really horrible. I'm sorry. But anyway, you can draw it with a walk. And then other things you got to think about is a bean stitch is a thickness of 3. You can change it to 5. And what does a bean stitch mean? That's how many stitches, how many times it's going to go over this particular location. Why does that matter? Thread is really thin, right? So if I just go 1 stitch, which is a regular walk normal, it's going to look really thin and kind of weak. That thicker lines that are still super thin, but it's like instead of coloring with a pencil, it's now like a bold marker. It's just easier to see. That's the bean stitches. So all that does is a bean stitch of 5 means there's going to be 5 pieces of thread at each location. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So a bean stitch of 3, it's going to waltz. The machine's going to waltz, right? So it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. That as it's sewing, that's what it's going to be physically doing. Now, you can always do other things too, which are a lot of fun. Play with these decoratives. I love them. So decoratives are so much fun because they're so versatile. You can create your own. You can do all kinds of fun stuff. So there's like the, let's see. Well, yeah, I was doing chains. These are different ones I made. So I wanted something that was a little bolder, a little wider than a bean stitch, but still gave me that narrow look. So I created this guy. There's a V again that gives the kind of a seed stitch look. So I created that one. So you can create your own, or you can use ones that are built in. All right, that's a really poor one for that. Let's see. Oh, the rope one is fun. I like that one. Right? So you can create your own. I think here's one I really liked that I did a while back. So if I select that, change that to decorative, and I think I have it in here. Horse, where's my horse? Yeah, there's my horsey. So that's another one I created for like a quilting. I did some quilted bags and I wanted a repeating pattern. So you can do all kinds of really fun stuff. So I can even copy, paste this guy, bring it in, change that to, I don't know, geospin. Hey, that's kind of fun. Okay. So you can get all kinds of looks just playing with the decoratives. Okay. All right. Any other questions I'm missing? I don't think so. Okay. All right, y'all. Any other questions before I call it a day? I hesitate to say it, but my dog finally decided not to bother me. He's been really annoying the last few Design Shop Talks. So he's laying down over there. All right, you guys, have a fantastic weekend. I will be back next Friday, and be sure if you're headed to Long Beach, let me know if you see anything cool. I want to know. So have a blast, and I will talk to you guys next week. Bye, everyone. Have fun sewing.